You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney prior to or during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?
When the wolf is at your door, you running's over, that's for sure. He already knows all about you. Cut you down, no matter by you. Now you better walk the line. Real life, real
Warning. This episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast, may contain descriptions of acts of violence or that of a sexual nature and should be for people that are 18 years or older. Heed my warning, people. I do not get the facts of these cases off of the internet or from some television show. The facts I'm retelling you were presented to me by the victims of the crimes or the perpetrators who committed the crimes against the victims. My descriptions of the crime scenes, what I saw with my own two eyes. If you're going to get offended, please turn this podcast off now. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Woody Overton. Continuing with Scorch, the state versus Scott Peterson today, and y'all, believe it or not, I can actually see the end of this, maybe 2 more episodes. But we will be continuing in the death penalty phase of the trial and some more wonderful, wonderful character witnesses, if you will, for Scott Peterson. But y'all don't forget, hashtag Justice for Haley. We pushed everything out yesterday. If you're so inclined, feel free to use the numbers and the emails and everything and ask the powers that be to pick Haley's case back up and push for justice. Get it before a grand jury. That's all we're asking. Get it before a grand jury with all the facts, not the facts that you had before. And let's hopefully they'll return with the murder indictment. I don't see how anybody could return with anything else. Live show Saturday, July 19th, Southeastern Louisiana University in Hammond, Louisiana, Student Union Theater. I will be on the stage rocking it old school, real life, real crime, never before heard, raw and unscripted story. In the VIP event to follow, you can get your tickets. Any of our social media has a link to it, to Southeastern, so they're controlling all the ticket sales. So y'all go there and get them, and if they're not sold out, but try to get them. And we have a block of rooms at the Home to Suite Hilton's in Hammond, Louisiana. It's a brand new hotel, less than a year old, and we're going to be there all weekend, and you get a discount for that also. That being said, let's get right back into the longest podcast series ever, Scorch, the state versus Scott Peterson. And today's date is going to be December the 6th, 2004. And our good friend, defense attorney Pat Harris, is going to be interviewing a lady named Rachel Clara Latham. So I'm just saying, of course, his name and then Latham when she answers, okay? So she says, Rachel, if you would, you are the daughter of, we just heard from John Latham. You're his youngest daughter. Is that right? Latham, that is correct. If you would, just give us a little bit of your background as far as you grew up in Alaska. Latham, I did. I grew up in Alaska for the first 13 years of my life. And then I went to part of the 8th grade and 9th through 12th grade in San Luis Obispo and Los Osos. Harris, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Was it very different growing up in Alaska than coming to California? Latham, It was. It was a whole different world up there. Harris. What was different? Why was it different? Latham. I think the lifestyle that my family leads is very different. It's tied in with the seasons. And my dad's a diving outfitter, so we spent a lot of time outdoors. Harris. Would you go with him on certain times, those kinds of things? Latham. We would all go up. We have hunting camps up in the interior of Alaska. We would all go up there in the fall for big game hunts. And the rest of the year, we're located in Yucatan. Harris. Why was the decision made to actually bring you down to California, put you in school there? Latham. My parents gave us the opportunity to get an education down south. Harris. And was that important to you? Latham. It was important to me. They gave us a choice, and both my sister and I chose to go to California, even though that meant giving up a lot for them and for us. They didn't see us a good portion of the year, and we lived with family and friends in California. And my sister and I did not live together. We lived in different towns, and part of the time, in fact. Harris. When you say you didn't live together, you lived where? Latham. Well, I lived with Aunt Jackie and Uncle Lee for part of the 8th grade and for 9th grade. And after that, I lived with friends. Harris. And your sister lived where? Latham. She lived in Los Altos with family and friends for 3 years, and then another friend in San Luis Obispo for her senior year of high school. Harris. When you lived with Lee and Jackie, did they have a large house or a small house or a medium-sized house? Latham. They had a very small house in Morro Bay. They just moved up there and semi-retired. And actually, in order for me to live with them, they had to clear out their office. So they chose to clear out their office and allow me to live with them. And I remember Jackie, she'd pay her bills at the kitchen table and clean it up every night. And they let me have that space the entire time I was there. It was very generous of them. Harris. After the 9th grade, growing into your 10th grade year, did you not live with them after that? Do you know why? Latham. I do now. Jackie has some health problems, and it was because of that I didn't live with them anymore. They told me they would have loved for me to have continued living with them, but it wasn't possible. Harris. What was it like living with Lee and Jackie? Latham. It was a lot of fun. She was very loving. She's one of the most generous people I know. She's always trying to bring family together, planning things to have people and have a good time. Harris. What's Lee like? Latham. Lee was very loving and very sweet, but also quiet, sort of reserved. He'd often do his own thing. He'd go golfing, and a lot of time on the weekends he'd be doing his own thing. And Jackie and I would be hanging out. But they would always take me on whatever trips they were going on. And at the time, Uncle Lee was into the missions, and we'd make trips up to San Juan Bautista and various missions. And they'd always take me with them, you know. I was part of the family. I was like a daughter. Harris. They treated you like a daughter? Latham. Definitely. Harris. You had 2 different points in your early life on you had contact with Scott, and I want to talk about the first one. Latham. Okay. Harris. Beginning when you were actually living in Alaska, would you come down to California and actually visit with your relatives? Latham. We would. My parents made an effort to come down. They wanted us to know our cousins and her family. And they also wanted to see their family. So every year we'd come down and spend some time with Jackie and Lee in San Diego and the family. And we'd stay with them. Harris, what was the age difference? Latham, I believe it's 8 years. Harris, so you're like his younger cousin? Latham, well, and at that, when you're younger, it seems you're a lot younger. Harris, what were your memories of when you were young visiting? What were your memories of Scott? Latham, I always remember Scott taking the time to spend time with my sister Anna and myself. And she's just a little bit older than I am, about a year. And he was probably in junior high or high school. But nonetheless, he'd take the time to take us out in his play golf cart, take us for a little ride down the street. And we'd probably never been in a golf cart before that. And one day, we were curious and we were asking about the golf balls and we were curious about what they were made of and what was inside of them. And he said, well, let's find out. So we went in the garage and he put the golf ball in the vice grips and we busted it open and found out what was inside of it. And, bounced it around the driveway and took it to show our parents. He was always willing to take the time out, even though he probably had more fun things to do during that time of his life than hang out with his young girl cousins. He was willing to spend the time with us. Harris, did you always find him to be sweet? Latham, yes. Harris, a gentleman? Latham, yes. Harris, you also seen him for Thanksgivings when he had come to Alaska? Latham, that's true. He'd come up with his brothers and parents to Yakutat. Harris, when you would see them interact, the family sort of interact, how was Scott with the rest of the family? Latham, he was right there with everyone else. I mean, he was the youngest, but he was always in there with everyone. And he went hunting with the guys and they go bird hunting. Aunt Jackie and my sister and my mom and I, we'd usually stay at home during the day. We may go on a walk or something, but he was always in with the boys. Harris, now you had a second opportunity to get back in touch with him when you moved to San Luis Obispo. Is that right? Latham, that's correct. Harris, that was during the time period that Scott was going to school there and working there? Latham, yeah, he was at Cal Poly at the time. Harris, where would you see him then? Latham, usually it was at Jackie and Lee's house or at Abba's, the restaurant that he worked at. We go there on a pretty regular basis and he'd wait on us. Harris, let me just make sure the jury is clear. When you say Abba's, that's not technically the name of the restaurant, is it? Latham, no, I don't think so. We just called it Abba's. Harris, you just called it Abba's. That was the name of the owner? Latham, yes, that's correct. Harris, it's actually the Pacific Cafe? Latham, yes, it's the Pacific Cafe. I'm sorry. Harris, go ahead. You were saying? Latham, so we would see him at the Pacific Cafe and he'd be waiting on us, and he'd also come over to the house on a very regular basis. And I was living with Jackie and Lee at the time. He would come over to help them with yard work. He would come over and Lee and him would work on their cars. He was always around. Women, have you ever had one of those days where everything just feels off? Like you're stuck in the middle of a mystery and you can't solve it? Your energy's crashing, your mood's swinging like a suspect in an interrogation room, and no matter what you do, nothing adds up. Well, Cindy has been there, and sometimes the real culprit is hiding in the shadows, is hormonal imbalance. Here's a twist. More than 1,000 hormone disruptors are living rent-free in our world, lurking in our food, our air, even our skincare. And when hormones go haywire, it can feel like you're trapped in your own personal true crime story, especially during premenopause or menopause. But here's the good news. This is the one case you can crack with Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth. All you need to do is take their free 2-minute quiz. You'll answer a few simple questions. Just like that, you'll get a personalized recommendation to help bring your hormones back into balance. No long investigation required. What I love is that Hormone Harmony is made with adaptogens, natural science-backed herbal extracts that help your body adapt to stress and hormonal changes. Whether it's PMS, hot flashes, brain fog, or sleepless nights, this product is designed to help you feel like you again. Over 40,000 glowing reviews don't lie, and neither do the results. 86% of women say they started losing weight. 77% say their mood improved. And the biggest win, 100% say they feel like themselves again. For a limited time, you can get 15% off your entire first order at happymammoth.com. Just use the code RLRC at checkout. That's happymammoth.com, code RLRC for 15% off today. This April, we're celebrating Earth Month, and it's the perfect time to think about the choices we make every day, especially the ones we don't always think about, like where we sleep. If there's one thing I've learned, it's the quality is sustainability. When you invest in something well made, it lasts longer, and that means less waste, fewer replacements, and a bigger impact on protecting our planet. That's why I love Avocado Green Mattress. Avocado makes certified organic mattresses, crafted with non-toxic materials in their very own zero-waste factory. They've already diverted 85% of their waste from landfills, and they're aiming for 90%. It's not just about comfort. It's about caring for the planet with every choice we make. And here's something I really love. Avocado is a proud member of the 1% for the planet. That means at least 1% of every dollar they earn goes straight to environmental nonprofits tackling climate change and protecting ecosystems. So when you choose Avocado, you're not just sleeping better, you're giving back. If you're thinking about upgrading your mattress, do it with purpose. Choose one that's better for you and better for the planet. Head to avocadomattress.com today and save up to 10% on certified organic mattresses. Dream of better for you and the planet. Harris. Did he also pick you up from school? Latham. He would. He'd pick me up from school. I mean, I participated in after school activities, and if Jackie and Lee couldn't pick me up, he would come pick me up from the playing field. If I was playing softball, he'd come pick me up after school if I had some other activities. He was always willing to help out. I think that had a lot to do with Jackie and Lee's relationship with Scott, too. I mean, their quote relationship. They were willing to help each other out. Harris. I'm sorry. In what way? I want to ask you to elaborate on that. That had to do with their relationship? Latham. How they would help each other out? Harris. Yes. Latham. I think they had a great positive relationship. And like Scott needed, something done, they would do it for him and vice versa. If they needed some help in the yard or an errand run, there was no hesitation. Harris. Did he also regularly come to your soccer games? Latham. He did. And Lacey did as well. They come to my soccer games. They come to football games. And Jackie and Lee did too. Harris. You got to meet, while you were there in St. Louis, that was the time period that Scott had met Lacey. Is that right? Latham. I actually remember the first time that Jackie and Lee met Lacey as well. I was there, and we all went to lunch at a cafe in Morro Bay. Harris. How was that? Latham. It was a fun time. I remember really liking her from the beginning. Harris. Did you have the opportunity, when you say come over to their house, did you ever have the opportunity to watch him interact with his parents? Latham. Definitely. Yes. Harris. What would you say his relationship, from your viewpoint, what was his relationship like with his mother? Latham. He was always respectful and loving. I mean, he'd be joking around, but he was always very sweet. And he asked her, Mom, do you need anything moved? And he'd help it. If she did tell him, he would do it. Harris. How about his relationship with his father? What was your viewpoint on that? Latham. They were joking around, but always loving. And they do activities together. They'd go golfing together. Harris. You told me last night about another side of Scott that had to deal with this while he was in Morro Bay, in the area, and dealing with a lot of the elderly people around. If I could just ask you a little bit about, first of all, could you tell us who are Sue and Bill Warren? Latham. Sue and Bill Warren are good friends of the family. And to me, it seems sort of like they were pseudo grandparents to Scott. Harris. How would you see him interact with them? Latham. Very loving, sweet manner. Scott, they would play golf together. The guys would. And Sue wanted, and she would come over for dinner, and we'd go out for dinner, and we saw them quite often. Harris. And did there seem to be genuine affection there? Latham. Definitely, yes. Harris. Would he help them in different projects and different things? Latham. Yes. Harris. How about, you mentioned another family called the Campbells. Latham. The Campbells, they lived right across the street. And they were an elderly couple as well. And Scott would always be helping them. As well as, there was a neighbor next door who was elderly. And she couldn't get around too well. And if she needed some bricks moved or something built, he was there. There was also another woman down the street who had multiple sclerosis. And Scott would do gardening work for her and help her out as well. Harris. At some point, did your relationship become close enough with Scott and Lacey that they actually offered to have you live with them? Latham. They did. When I was a sophomore that year, after I lived with Jackie and Lee, they actually offered to have me come and live with them. And they were still in school in St. Louis. And they were in college. I just got done with college a little bit ago, and I don't know if I would have been able to do the same. You're living with your girlfriend at the time, and you invite your little cousin to come live with you. It was a very, very generous offer on their behalf. Harris. The times you were there in St. Louis, particularly, did you find him to be a person who cared about others? Latham. Definitely, yes. Harris. Did you find that he had a positive influence on the people around him? Latham. Yes. He may have been quiet about it, but it was definitely there. Yes. Harris. Has he made a positive influence on you? Latham. Yes, he has. Harris. How so? Latham. I've always seen Scott as a leader and someone to look up to. He like I said before, he may be quiet about it. You may have to go and talk to him. He may be a little standoffish to someone who didn't know him. But if you get to talking to him, he's very down to earth, very loving, and he's willing to help. And that means a lot. Harris, how would putting him to death affect you personally? Latham, I think it would break my heart. I think it would be horrible for the family and destroy everything. We used to have the family reunions, and they were really fun and wonderful times. And I mean, we haven't even had one the last couple of years. I don't think it would never be the same for the entire family. It just wouldn't. Harris, that's all I have. All right, y'all, I'm rolling with these because we're almost done. Now, Pat Harris is going to be interviewing Robert Latham, December 6th, 2004. Harris, good morning. Latham, good morning. Harris, previously, we have heard from your older brother, John, and you are Jackie's brother also. Is that correct? Latham, yes. I'm the youngest. Harris, you're the youngest? How much younger are you than Jackie? Latham, almost 2 years to the date. Harris, we heard the history a little bit. We had John talk a little bit about the family history. So I won't go back into the tragedies that occurred, but you did, in fact, also, the entire family was put in an orphanage at the time of your mother's debilitating illness. Is that right? Latham, this is true. I probably spent most of the time there at the Nazareth house, the orphanage. Harris, is that because you were put there at an early age? Latham, yeah, I was put there at the age of 3 until I was 14. And Harris, I think one thing I want the jury to be clear on, I know that we talked a little bit about Jackie at the time. John talked about the orphanage. This wasn't a situation where your mother didn't want you. Is that correct? Latham, no, I never felt unloved. I always felt Mom wanted us home, but it wasn't possible. Harris, she just couldn't? Latham, she couldn't take care of us. We ended up taking care of her. Harris, the orphanage didn't provide for her to come see you very often, did it? Latham, no. There was kind of a, let's say, evolutionary process in the visitation. Seems like it starts just one day a month overnight, and then, as the time and your age progresses, it would be a weekend or two, but our mother had a very difficult time driving out with the scleroderma. She was basically turning into a skeleton. Harris, were you in the same place as Jackie? Were the two of you housed in the same place? That kind of thing. Latham, the boys and girls were kept different, on different sides of school. And there was like tennis courts and playground fences between the boys and the girls. They were separated by somewhat of age and boys and girls. So, Harris, they kept the boys and girls separate after school? Latham, yep, they did, except during mass in the classroom. Harris, what? So basically, then you weren't allowed a lot of contact with your sister? Latham, no, we didn't see each other a whole lot. We'd see each other through the fence mainly. Maybe I'd say hi. I can remember one particular time when the boys were being, I guess, rascals, throwing dirt clods at the fence, and they were showering it down on the girls, and I saw my sister there. Then I went over to her and, reached through the fence, and I asked her if she was all right. But it was a good place, there was a lot of care. Harris, you eventually moved back into the household? Latham. Yeah. At age 14, leaving the Nazareth house. John basically moved out. We had a small house and made room for me. And her mother was still alive then. And she died when I was 16. So basically spent, a couple of years with her. So Harris, was Jackie in the household at the time? Latham. Yep, she was. Harris. And what was she doing in the household? Latham. Well, when I could get her, I'd get her to do my ironing. She was being a mom and going to school and going to high school. Harris. So in the absence of your mother's ability to basically do the physical things, Jackie took care of most of the physical activities. Latham. She did a lot of them. Yeah. She did the shopping, a lot of the shopping, all the housekeeping. We all pitched in. We all learned how to plug in a vacuum cleaner. So, Harris, after you left the house, you told me was the situation, were you well off financially? Latham. Oh, no. Not at all. My mother was basically getting Social Security toward the end. Every dime had been exhausted, just getting us through school and getting us basically growing up. She ended up, when she died, after that, I got some Social Security through a guardian, but it didn't go very far. I remember, I can't remember if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas where my sister and I split a TV dinner and sis making a joke about it. And it is good enough with enough ketchup, but Harris, where did you go? You eventually, what was your profession or is your profession? Latham. I'm a general contractor. Harris. And you eventually moved on to that. Did you, after a period of time, go overseas? Latham. I didn't go overseas. I went to Saipan, an island of the Pacific, with my wife. She was a speech pathologist at the time, and there was a position in Saipan, and we had the kids, and we don't want to pass up on the opportunity to live on a tropical island. So, Harris, you say the kids, how many children do you have? Latham. I have 4. Harris. And what are their names? Latham. Lita, Abraham, Kelly, and Michael. Harris. Now, you eventually came back into the U.S. from the Navy. Latham. Yes. We spent 5 years, almost 6. Harris. So what I want to talk to you about then is the time period after you came back. And we've heard from John about the reconnection in the family. How did you see it from your angle with Jackie sort of reconnecting all the family? Latham. Pretty much the same way. Jacqueline was the heartbeat of the family, and she would call and coordinate, getting us reservations down in San Diego. And she would coordinate mainly with John's return. And he would come down and do some business and get out of the cold of Alaska for a while. And it was usually during February, March time. So we'd all get together and hang out. And saw Scott there many times. Lacey. Harris. Before you went into that, you said she was a heartbeat of the family. And what do you mean by that? What does that say to you? Latham. Well, sis is always, I refer to her as Wacky Acky Jackie. She's always fun, loving, and focused on getting people together, the family together. Harris. When you were there before you went to live in Saipan, you did have some opportunity to interact with Scott. Is that right? Latham. At that, yeah, actually, I went to Scott at the hospital when he was born. Did see him a few times as a young man. And I actually moved out of town and with some distance and was involved in a business that seemed to go into the weekends a lot. So I didn't get down to San Diego too much. But on occasion, we would get down and visit. Harris. As a young man, what struck you about him? Latham. He was always very nice and seemed very respectful and respectful to his family and both Lee and Jackie and everybody. Always, he always greeted everybody with a smile. He was quiet, somewhat like myself, I would say, a bit reserved, but always nice. Harris. Then later on, you reconnected when you came back and you had a chance to see him as you grew into a young man in his early 20s and so forth. Is that correct? Latham. Yes. Harris. When you saw him later on as a young man, what impressed you about him then? Latham. He was very industrious. He was always taking care of business and, hardworking and a good sense of humor. Quiet sense of humor. Harris. Is he somebody you just enjoyed being around? Latham. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He was easy to be around. Harris. How about your kids? How did they feel about being around him? Latham. Well, when they got to know him, they really liked him and they thought it was really great to have such a great cousin. He was just a little older and they all enjoyed him. Harris. You mentioned to me the thing that struck you is he always tried very hard to please his parents. Latham. He did. Harris. Do you still see that in him? Latham. Yeah. Harris. Is that a trait you feel like has gone from time to time, from when he was very young until the time you see him now? Latham. It's been a consistent trait. Harris. Ever seen him rebel or anything as a teenager or talk back to his parents? Latham. Nope. He's always been very respectful. Harris. Do you feel like there's a hope for Scott if he is allowed to live in jail? A hope that he could have a positive influence on others? Latham. Yes, I do. Harris. Why? Latham. Well, first of all, I think the verdict is a mistake and that in time, things will change. Harris. But why do you think he can be a positive influence in jail? Latham. Because he's a positive person. He will look, develop an attitude of trying to make it work, make it real, make it good. Harris. Will this affect you if he is put to death? Latham. Absolutely. Harris. In what way? Latham. It will affect our entire family. And like I said, I believe it's a mistake, and I wouldn't want that mistake to be on other people. Harris. Well, that's all I have. Thank you. Just keeps rolling, y'all. Curious as to who they're going to call next. You called everybody in the world. Jury's sitting up there still waiting, still debating, but let's go ahead and try to get one more done if we can today. And then literally I can see the end of the list. So stick with me. Lita Latham, Scott's first cousin. So it's December 6, 2004. And again, Harris is doing an examination. Harris, we just heard from Robert Latham. Is that your father? Latham, yeah. Harris, you grew up in San Diego or where? Latham, I grew up primarily in Rancho Cucamonga. Harris, and where is that in relation to San Diego? Latham, it's northeast of it. So I spent most of the time with my mom, and then I spent every other weekend with my dad, and he lived in Idlewild for most of my childhood, which is east of where I grew up. Harris, and that's about what, an hour and a half or so from San Diego, or hour and a half, 2 hours from San Diego? Latham, yeah, around there. Harris, where do you live now? Latham, I live in Costa Mesa. Harris, and what do you do for a living? Latham, I'm an environmental educator, so I teach science for grade school children in schools or out in the field programs. Harris, you have a brother and a sister, two brothers and sisters, is that right? Latham, 2 brothers and a sister. Actually, I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, one that's not a Latham. Harris, okay, got it. Where do you fall in the family lineup? Latham, I'm the oldest. Harris, where do you fall in terms of relationship to Scott, age-wise? Latham, I'm about 2 years younger than Scott. Harris, as you were growing up, did you have the opportunity to see Scott? Latham, yep, we've always grown up together, shared memories. In fact, even shared a crib. Scott's crib became mine when I was born. And then we played together as kids, and we would get together. Either they would come to Idlewild or we would go down to San Diego and spend weekends there. And when we were with my dad playing around the house, Harris, what kind of things would you do as kids? Latham, we'd play games together and we'd play out in the backyard. It was the best place because they kind of lived in a rural area that backed up to a hillside with lots of rocks. So they always had elaborate forts out there, and we'd play out in the forts and we'd play inside the house. We, Scott and John, developed even a magic game that we would play when, well, they could only fool us a couple times with it. But I remember one time when we got there, they would hide out in the closet and pull the closet closed, and then we would sit outside and John would say the magic words, and then Scott, unbeknownst to us, would climb through the ceiling out and then run out of the house. And then John would open the door and Scott would be gone. So we'd play, kids games like that. Harris, teach you how to try and catch crayfish? Latham, yep. There was a little area with a stream nearby, and Scott would take us down and teach us how to pick a crayfish up out of the stream without getting pinched. And our Uncle Patrick had told us they would pinch our toes off. So Scott taught us how to use tennis rackets to pick them up and look at them. Harris, growing up with Scott, you saw him as a fun person? Latham, yeah, and we always had a good time together. Harris, I see the word quiet has been used a lot. Was it always quiet to you? Latham, well, he was always quiet when you first get there. And once you kind of break that down, once you would start playing together, then he was a lot of fun. And he's that way now. He's very quiet, but still a lot of fun. Harris, you at some point, your relationship with Scott sort of took a hiatus, right? You didn't see him for how long? Latham, right. When my dad moved overseas, then we lived with my mom only. And so we didn't get together with the Petersons at all, or even the other Lathams. So it wasn't until I was coming back from being overseas and I was a young adult that I saw Scott. Harris, once you reconnected later, did anything change? Latham, not a lot of change in our relationship. We had changed, obviously, as people, because we weren't kids anymore. We were adults. And Scott was still the quiet kid, but now he was an adult. And so I remember the first time I saw him, I hadn't seen him in like 6 years, and he is kind of quiet and didn't know if he was, quiet. Still, because he was a shy kid or if he's unapproachable, but that's the same old Scott. Once you get up there and Scott hanging out with him and having conversations with him, then he is a real great guy. Harris, where would you see him? Latham, we saw him at family gatherings. And the first time I saw him was at Jackie and Lee's 25th wedding anniversary. And then from then on, everybody seemed to be in the same place at the same time. Ann and Rachel were living down in San Luis Obispo. And our family was all down basically in California, now in the States. And so we always got together down in La Jolla for the family gatherings, at least once a year when Uncle John was down. Harris, did you also have a chance to get to know Lacey a little bit? Latham, yeah. I remember the first time I met her was at Aunt Jackie's and Uncle Lee's 25th wedding anniversary. But I didn't actually get a chance to talk to her until one of the family gatherings after that. And I remember the first impression I have of her was that she was the perfect match for Scott. Harris, why? Latham, Scott's very quiet and seems a bit standoffish, kind of reserved. And it took somebody like Lacey to bring him out, to get him to kind of crack that shell in him. Harris, you told me about a time when Lacey and Scott were down in San Diego for a family reunion and didn't show up on a Sunday. Latham, yeah, they didn't show up on Sunday. That was the time we usually got together for breakfast as a family, and I hadn't seen Scott in a while, so we were wondering where Scott was. And Aunt Jackie had told me that he had actually gone out early and would be meeting us later because he was taking, I guess it was an older friend of his, an older woman, and Lacey was going with them. He's going to take her to Mass in the morning, and then he'd be joining us later. Harris, is that the kind of things you heard or saw that Scott and Lacey would do? Latham, absolutely. Scott's always been very generous. Even as we were kids, he was, always, they always had the cool toys and, the cool games and things like that, we were always interested in playing with. And Scott was always generous with his toys, but also generous with his time as we're adults. Harris, as you sit here today, what are things that you feel like Scott has made is a positive impact on your life? Latham, well, I think about the type of person that Scott is. As far as we can I think all of us can say in our family that we think Scott is a great guy and a real good person. But one of the qualities that's great is his quietness and he doesn't want to be the center of attention, but he does a lot of good things on the side did you have to really dig around to find out he's doing? Like, he never told us the night that we were together that he was going to leave early in the morning to take everybody to mass. You know, couldn't drive themselves. And he wouldn't have mentioned it any other time, but Aunt Jackie did. So he's very giving, but in a way that he doesn't want to be recognized for it necessarily. And he's very loving individual, very fun, very much the man that I hope my son becomes. Harris. The last question I'll ask you is that you told me that although he was quiet, when he would smile, what effect did that have on you? Latham. He kind of lights up the room. He's got a great smile. I haven't seen it in a while, but he's got a twinkle in his eye, and everybody smiles along with him. His whole face smiles with him, his eyes especially. Harris. Thank you. That's all I have. All right, y'all, wrapping up this episode of Scorched. Again, obviously, you know why I think it's Scorched. She likes to smile. His eyes twinkle. You know, he taught him how to crawfish. In other words, get a crawfish out of the ditch with a tennis racket so it wouldn't pinch their toes off. What the fuck's that got to do with him cutting baby Connor out of Lacey's stomach and murder, or maybe he didn't cut her out of the stomach, but murdering the both of them? So, Scorch. Again, I said it once, I'll say it 1,000 more times. They better pray to God that nobody's DNA but his comes back on that piece of duct tape. Otherwise, this dude's going to walk. So, almost done, finally, but y'all are following it. So thank y'all for following and listening and liking and sharing and all that good stuff. And we have literally, let me count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 2 more days of testimony, y'all. December Tuesday the 7th, December the 7th, the Tuesday, and December the 8th, the Wednesday. And then they rest, and give the final arguments. Okay. And then you get the vote. So LOPA, Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency, you know, it's my jam. I will be guest bartending at Walk-On's Restaurant Bistro in Zachary, Louisiana on, I think it's April the 8th. Look at it and see. It's during an LSU baseball game. And let me look and make sure. March, April the 8th. It's a Tuesday, y'all. And it'll be in the evening times. I don't know the hours exactly yet, but we're going to post them. And Walk-On's is going to share it. But Kevin Garrick, I call him affectionately Kool-Aid, and I are going to be bartending, and any tips we get are going straight to Louisiana Organ Procurement Agency. So, and they're going to have a representative there, and hopefully some of y'all who aren't organ donors can sign up yet. And you don't have to be an organ donor from the state of Louisiana to sign up for LOPA. You could be from Iowa. Just go to lopa.org, take 2 minutes, fill it out, sign up to be a hero, people. People are dying every single day needing organs. LOPA helps the families of the heroes and the recipients, and they help them afterwards. It's an amazing organization, and they're a nonprofit, and that's why I support them. But thank y'all for listening, liking, and tuning in. Don't forget #Justice for Haley. Goodness gracious, if we can get a murder indictment on this, or just at least get it brought before the grand jury, which is what Miss Barbara wants. And then, of course, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you get True Crime Time with Cindy and I. Thank y'all for liking and sharing that. That's awesome. It's pretty fun. If you have any ideas for stories or what have you, just let us know. And I'm Woody Overton, your host of Real Life, Real Crime, the podcast. Until next time or ever, don't let me catch you down on Murder Bayou. Peace. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney prior to and during any question. If you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. Do you understand your rights?